Hello, I'm Jim Demo with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you both for meeting with us. Daniel, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Chelatchie Prairie Railroad?
Yes, it's a short line railroad that was built in the mid to late 1800s. It's a 33-mile railroad that goes from Fruit Valley Junction and for Fruit Valley and 78th Street, and it goes wanders sort of in a northeasterly direction up through Prairie and through Battleground and all the way up to Chelatchie.
Okay.
And it was primarily developed for use in the logging industry when they were logging up in that area and bringing the logs down and equipment back on the train.
Okay, and it is county owned?
It's county owned. It was purchased by the county in the early 1980s, 82 or something like that.
Okay, and what are the current types of uses for this rail line?
Currently it's freight rail, freight traffic up to Battleground. And the primary product up there is plastic pellets for making milk cartons.
Okay.
And then further down in the Rye Junction area, which is 78th and St. John's area, they're delivering more products, building material products, some products that use on the rail, replacing ties and replacing junctions on the railroad. But there's other smaller things like sand delivery and things like that. Every day there's certain things that come in, just small pieces of things, and then periodically there's larger that over the year comes in on a monthly basis.
And don't they have like a holiday train or something occasionally?
Up in the upper
there?
reaches,
Okay.
which is above Battleground, there is a volunteer group that operates on the northern part of the track, and they do excursion trains. And they primarily work in the summer season and in special occasions like Mother's Day and Christmas train. They have a Christmas train that runs for 3 or 4 weekends during the Christmas season that they take people on an excursion, and then they can pick up a Christmas tree at a big lot they have up there and bring it back with them. So it's kind of a holiday outing.
Okay, and is the track ready for more uses, or would, if there are more uses, would the track have to be developed, or is it ready to go?
As the traffic increases on the freight portion of it, which is up to Battleground, there would be additional improvements needed as the volume increases. Certainly, it's handling the current volume, and we put in over $3 million worth of improvements in the lower part of the rail system to take account for the traffic that's going on right now. So it's handling everything that's there now, but as you develop more land, obviously, and more industry comes in, and heavier trains and heavier train loads. If you look at back in the late 1800s, the cars were about 1/10 the size of what the cars are today, and so to haul those big cars up the line, it needs improvement.
Okay. Jose, can you please tell us about the recent amendments to the State Growth Management Act?
Sure. The Senate Bill 5517 was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor this summer. I believe it was July 6th, and it went into effect October 19th. Essentially, what it does is allows for freight rail dependent uses in areas that weren't currently allowed in our rural and resource zones, as long as they're adjacent to the railroad. And like Dan said, there's 33 miles worth of railroad, but most of what we're focusing on is the areas outside of the urban growth boundary.
Okay. And does the bill have any restrictions on the type of cargo that can be carried?
So some of the biggest restriction is in terms of storing, processing, fabricating coal, natural gas, and crude oil are prohibited.
Okay. All right. So why did the state take this action?
The state has a freight mobility plan, and so this is consistent with that to try to use or utilize the existing infrastructure that we have to try to minimize expenses for new infrastructure and trying to use and being efficient with what we currently have on the books.
Sure. So and we talked about this, have companies expressed interest in this railroad developing along there?
Yes, in talking with the Columbia River Economic Development Council, they have received a number of companies who are interested in looking for property that's associated or adjacent to the rail line.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we've seen the interest
Okay.
for that.
So, Jose, we were out at a meeting held at Prairie High School earlier this fall, where you had a public meeting talking about the issue, and in that you said there was going to be 2 phases for implementing this change.
Correct.
So let's first focus on phase 1.
All right.
What are the immediate next steps that need to take place?
So the first thing that we needed to do was to update our comprehensive plan to in order to recognize the changes that were made at the state level. So we're putting in a definition of freight rail dependent uses, allowing for that in our rural and resource element, and making some changes to our transportation element. And then the other part is to create an overlay map. Overlay is just another zone that allows for additional uses or more specific uses and more specific regulations for a narrow set of uses. And so that would we're proposing to apply that in the section between 149th to the north and about 119th to the south. And that would be the first phase of the overlay. We looked at the language in the bill talks about properties that are adjacent to the rail line, and we started out with about a 500-foot distance, which is a little more than abutting the rail line.
Okay. So I know there's already been hearings held with the County Planning Commission, and I think there was a work session with the Board of Counselors. So this program's airing is between December 24th and February 4th. So what's the next hearing?
So the next hearing would be January 9th at 10 a.m. with the Board of County Counselors to consider the recommendations of the Planning Commission.
Okay. And this would just be in reference to phase 1 of
First
this?
phase, correct.
Okay. And why is this, it seems to be happening very quickly. Why is that taking place so quickly?
So, like I mentioned, the bill was passed this summer, effective in October. As Dan had mentioned, there has been interest over the last several years from companies, and I think the idea is to try to get lands ready for those opportunities. And so this first phase, we can only amend our comprehensive plan once a year, and in the timing that the bill was passed, we just had a really short period of time to do that. And so that's why we divided it out to the first phase this year, which we've extended it out to January 9th. And then the second phase are really development regulations and a use list that doesn't have the same time frame restriction.
Okay, let's talk about so phase 2.
Yeah.
What's that tentative completion date?
So we're hoping to have something done by the springtime of 2018.
Okay.
We're going to develop a use list and development regulations to essentially list what types of uses could be allowed in the overlay area, and then how to mitigate impacts with neighboring properties through setbacks, landscaping standards, accessing to properties, and those types of things.
Okay, so Daniel, how will the Railroad Advisory Board be involved in this phase of the project?
Well, we'll work closely with the planning department and develop those regulations and make suggestions as to what can and can't be used on there and how they might be used and what kind of things we need to do to make them happen. Obviously our goal is to get the maximum use of land available and use of the railroad, but we want to be cognizant of the demands for the community in terms of what they want to see and what they want to do. And as we all know, the oil terminal was a contentious issue, and we don't want to get into those kind of issues.
And that's been taken off the table already by the state, so
The state,
people
yes.
don't have to be concerned about
We
that.
don't have to be concerned
Okay.
about that. And we want to help develop the regulations in terms of how the property looks from the neighbors, because we're going through communities that have already been developed to some cases. So you want to make sure that it's hidden from them, with berms or setbacks, and tree plantings and things like that. Similar thing was done with the rural industrial land bank issue out there that we helped develop those issues with respect to how the property looked to the neighborhood.
Okay. And what types of uses are we anticipating?
So I think the bill talks about fabricating, processing, storage. So some manufacturing, some storage, warehousing would probably be the biggest thing. And looking at some of the things that the Columbia River Economic Development Council has talked about in terms of industries would be some clean manufacturing, some computer manufacturing, and those types of things.
Okay.
We don't see any real demand for heavy industry, and we would not anticipate it, nor would we probably want to have smokestack type industries in there. So it would be light manufacturing, as Jose said, for the most part. And the bulk of the interest has all been in those categories. A lot of more of the warehousing and distribution stuff that would be included in the uses there.
Okay. And really, when we're talking economic development, I mean, you're talking job creation.
Correct.
Which is a big goal for the county, is
Yes.
to have more job opportunities for residents.
Yes, on this side of the river.
Okay. Okay. We talked a little bit about mitigating factors. So berms, tree plantings, those will be considered as part of this.
Mm-hmm.
So how will the public be engaged in this second phase?
So in all of the development regulations we have hearings with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Councilors. Prior to that, we expect to have some work sessions with the board. The meetings we have with the Railroad Advisory Board are open to the public, and we expect to have some open houses probably out in the area, similar to what we had prior. And I think there'd be a lot of interest when we have more specific uses. I think that was one of the concerns that folks had, was not knowing what particular use was going to be, and to get an understanding of what that might be next door to them.
Okay. And Daniel, people can come to the Railroad Advisory Board.
They're welcome anytime. We hold those on the second Monday of the month, and at 4 o'clock in the training room at the Clark County Board office. And like I said, they're welcome to come and listen and make any comments they might want to make at that meeting.
Okay, and then that flows through to the Planning Commission, and then people can still come to the Planning Commission, and then when the Board of Councilors would consider adoption.
Yes, those are all public meetings where we encourage public input throughout the process.
Great. Okay. So, if it sounds like there might be people very curious in this issue. Where can they check?
So our website, www.clark.wa.gov, is it /community-planning?
Yes.
And then there's a page for freight rail dependent uses where we'll have a list of meetings and what's coming up next.
Okay. And then there's also telephone number 397-2280.
Yes, and the extension is 4898.
4898. Give the extension. Okay. All right. Well, thank you both very much for meeting with us, and good luck with this issue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.